At 74, I thought I had everything figured out. Years of hard work, sacrifice, and struggle had led me to this moment, retirement, the reward for a lifetime of effort. But that night, my world began to crumble. The celebration I had planned to mark the end of one chapter became the beginning of a nightmare. It was supposed to be my night of triumph, but instead, it was the night I realized that betrayal was much closer to home than I ever imagined. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story like this. Now, let's dive into it. I had waited my entire life for this moment. I was finally about to step away from the empire I had built, piece by piece, over decades of sweat, sacrifice, and relentless work. The dinner was supposed to be a celebration, a mark of an era closing and a new one beginning. The guests filled the room with laughter, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of chandeliers, and the air was thick with congratulations. My daughter Claire was there, beaming with pride, my grandchildren running around the room, and Derek, my son-in-law, standing by my side, quiet as usual, but always with that sharp, calculating look in his eyes. The night felt surreal. I had never imagined that, after everything, I would get this moment of respite. No more meetings, no more long hours at the office, just the feeling of having finally made it. But as I stood at the center of the room, greeting friends and family, something uncomfortable began to settle in my chest. The laughter seemed too loud, the music too cheerful, as if something beneath the surface was starting to stir. I couldn't place it, but the sensation was real, like a weight pressing down on my chest, suffocating my breath. And then Derek appeared at my side, holding out a glass of wine. His smile was polite, even friendly, but I noticed the way his eyes lingered on me, as if searching for something, measuring me in a way that made me uneasy. "Here, Lillian," he said, his voice smooth. "A drink to celebrate the end of an era." I took the glass from him, though the moment felt off, a vague sense of unease crawling up my spine. The wine, deep red and sparkling in the candlelight, almost seemed to shimmer with something other than just celebration. I brought it to my lips, and as I did, I caught a strange, almost metallic scent. I froze. The faint smell lingered in the air, unsettling in a way I couldn't explain. A sharp, tangy scent that made my stomach churn. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself that I was simply imagining things. Too much champagne, perhaps. But as the conversation swirled around me, I could no longer ignore the discomfort creeping over me. I took a small sip, pretending to enjoy it, but the taste was off. Too sharp, too bitter. I quickly set the glass down on the table, my mind racing. Claire, sitting next to me, smiled warmly and picked up the glass without hesitation. "Thanks, Mom," she said, unaware of my unease. She took a sip, then another, and I couldn't help but watch her, my heart pounding in my chest. The evening continued with the same forced cheer, but my mind couldn't focus. Something felt wrong. Every laugh, every cheer, every toast seemed to echo in the pit of my stomach. I kept glancing at Derek, trying to read his face, but his calm expression betrayed nothing. It wasn't until hours later, as the evening was winding down, that everything changed. Claire suddenly collapsed, her body jerking violently as convulsions took over her. Screams erupted around the room as people rushed to her side, but all I could do was stare in shock. The world around me seemed to blur, the sound of frantic voices muffled as my heart hammered in my chest. Claire, my bright, strong daughter, was shaking uncontrollably on the floor, her eyes rolling back in her head. Derek remained eerily calm. His face, usually tight with ambition, now wore an expression I couldn't quite place. He was standing off to the side, as if watching from a distance. I rushed to Claire, trying to hold her still, my hands shaking as I cradled her head. My mind was spinning. How could this be happening? Someone called 911. I don't know who. All I could focus on was Claire, her face pale, her breathing shallow and erratic. The chaos around me felt distant, like I was in a dream. As we rushed to the hospital, Derek sat beside me in the car, his posture stiff, his eyes trained on the road ahead. I could feel his presence next to me, his every breath making the air feel heavier. "I've seen this before," Derek said casually, his tone too measured, too controlled. "A friend of mine from college had a similar reaction to something like this. It was a rare substance, a chemical, I think. It's not unheard of." I froze. How did he know that? The question lingered in my mind, gnawing at me, turning my blood cold. A rare substance? I had never heard of such a thing, and yet Derek spoke of it with such certainty as if he knew exactly what had happened. I looked at him, my gaze sharp. He met my eyes briefly, his face betraying no hint of guilt, no sign of concern. "How would you know that?" I asked, my voice trembling more than I cared to admit. Derek shrugged, his lips curling slightly. "It's just something I remember. My friend had a similar reaction in college. Weird stuff happens sometimes, but don't worry, Claire will be fine. She just needs medical attention." I nodded, but my mind was racing. I couldn't stop the thought from taking root. Was he trying to poison me? Was this his doing? Or had Claire simply made a mistake and drunk from my glass? The doubt, the uncertainty, settled heavily in my chest, and as we arrived at the hospital, my entire body seemed to lock in place. As doctors rushed Claire into the emergency room, I stood in the waiting area, my hands trembling. I could feel the eyes of everyone around me, but my mind was consumed with a single thought, one burning question that had taken over my every waking moment. Had Derek poisoned me? And had Claire just been an innocent victim? I didn't know the answer yet, but I was beginning to realize that the storm that had begun this night would not pass easily. It was only just beginning. The feeling of doubt, sharp, gnawing, relentless, was beginning to erode my trust, and there was no going back. The sterile scent of the hospital filled my nostrils as I paced in the waiting room, my thoughts a whirlwind. Claire was in a bed somewhere down the hall, unconscious but stable. She had been stabilized enough for the doctors to confirm one thing. She had been poisoned with a rare substance. The words echoed in my head, each syllable a hammer to the chest. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I didn't know where to start. The world felt like it was spinning around me, but everything seemed to pause when Derek entered the waiting room. He looked as composed as ever, not a single strand of his perfectly styled hair out of place. His calmness, however, was unnerving. It was too calm for someone whose wife was in the ER, fighting for her life. He glanced at me and gave a tight smile. "She'll be fine, Lillian. It's just a rare substance. I'm sure it's nothing too serious." "How do you know that?" I snapped, perhaps a little too harshly. His casual dismissal of the situation made my stomach churn. Was he so indifferent to what had just happened to Claire? He raised an eyebrow, his expression unchanging. "Like I said, I knew someone in college who had a similar reaction. It's rare, but people recover from it." I froze. The same words he had said on the ride to the hospital. The same rare substance, the same lack of concern. The way he spoke of it was as if he were discussing a trivial matter, not the life-threatening situation we were in. He couldn't know this unless he had been involved in some way. The question gnawed at me, twisting in my gut. Claire's doctor appeared then, a kind man with a tired face, and his presence momentarily pulled me away from my thoughts. "Mrs. Pierce," he said, his voice grave but calm, "we've confirmed that your daughter was poisoned. It's a very rare substance, and the effects can be severe, but with prompt treatment, we believe she'll recover fully." I nodded, trying to keep my composure, but the storm inside me raged. "What is this substance?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It's difficult to pinpoint exactly, but we're running tests. What's important is that we got her here in time." I barely heard him. My mind was focused entirely on Derek. How did he know about this rare substance? How did he know it would cause such a reaction? And why had he acted so calm about it? Something didn't add up. As the doctor left, I turned to Derek, my eyes narrowing. "You seem so sure of yourself, almost too sure." He met my gaze, his eyes steady. "I told you, Lillian, I'm just trying to be helpful. There's no reason to jump to conclusions." I wanted to scream at him, to shake him until he confessed whatever part he had in this, but I couldn't. Claire needed me to stay calm. She needed me to be strong for her. So I held my tongue, but inside, the suspicion that had been quietly growing was now a loud, insistent scream. Claire, when she finally regained consciousness a few hours later, seemed confused but stable. The moment she opened her eyes, I grabbed her hand, relief flooding through me. But even as I held her, I felt the tension between us, a distance I couldn't explain. Mom?" she asked weakly. Her voice hoarse. "What happened?" "You were poisoned," I said, my voice trembling with the weight of the words. "Do you remember anything? What happened at the dinner?" She blinked up at me, clearly struggling to focus. I don't remember much. I was fine, and then everything went dark. Her eyes drifted past me, to Derek, who had been standing quietly at the side of the room, watching with an unreadable expression. Derek approached, placing a hand gently on Claire's arm. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "I'm okay," Claire replied softly, her gaze lingering on him. I saw the trust in her eyes, the unquestioning faith. It made my blood run cold. I couldn't hold back any longer. I needed her to hear me, to understand that something was wrong. "Claire, I need to ask you something," I said, my voice shaking with the emotion I'd been holding back. "I think Derek might have been involved in this. The way he acted, the things he said, it's too much of a coincidence. He knew about the rare substance, Claire. How would he know about it unless—" Claire cut me off, her voice sharp with a protective edge. "Mom, you're seeing things that aren't there. Derek would never do something like that." I froze. The words stung more than I could have imagined. Claire, my own daughter, was defending him. "But Claire," I started, my voice breaking. "No," she interrupted firmly, her gaze turning hard. "I'm fine, okay? Derek didn't do anything. You're just overreacting." I could feel the room closing in on me, suffocating me. My own daughter, the one I had protected for so many years, was looking at me as if I were the one who had lost my mind. I had no words left. How could I explain the unease that had settled deep inside me? How could I make her see the danger? I tried to keep my voice calm, but I couldn't mask the hurt. "Just don't tell Derek anything about what I said, okay? Promise me you won't." Claire frowned, but nodded. "Of course. I'm not going to worry him about this. He's already been through enough tonight." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her, to make her see what I saw, but I couldn't. She was too far gone, too blinded by her love for Derek. And in that moment, a rift began to form between us, one I couldn't mend, no matter how hard I tried. Derek was winning. I didn't know how or why, but I felt the cold reality creeping in. This wasn't just about Claire's poisoning. It was about something much bigger, something darker, and I had no idea how deep this betrayal went. I was alone in this fight, and I was beginning to realize that my family, the people I had spent my entire life protecting, might be the very ones conspiring against me. The weight of the betrayal was suffocating, and I couldn't breathe. How could my daughter, the one I had loved and raised, be involved in something so dark? How could I have been so blind to Derek's true nature, and worse, to the fact that my own flesh and blood was standing beside him, conspiring against me? I had to know the truth. I had to uncover every last detail, even if it meant going behind everyone's back, even if it meant risking the destruction of everything I had built. With Claire still recovering in the hospital, I knew I had time, but I couldn't trust anyone, not even my own family. Derek was too smooth, too careful. Every time I looked at him, I saw the calm mask he wore, hiding the manipulative mind underneath. There was a coldness in his eyes that unsettled me, and no matter how much I tried to dismiss it, the nagging feeling in my gut told me I wasn't imagining it. I made a decision. I hired a private investigator. His name was John, and I had met him through a trusted acquaintance. He was discreet, efficient, and, most importantly, he was someone I could trust with my deepest suspicions. I gave him a few simple instructions: follow Derek, track his movements, and report back to me. Every day, every hour, if necessary. I needed to know what he was doing, who he was meeting, and why. It didn't take long for John to come back with disturbing news. Derek had been meeting with people from the business world, all of whom seemed to be involved in shady dealings, ones that didn't align with the company he was supposed to be running. But it wasn't just the business meetings that made my stomach turn. It was the secretive nature of everything. Derek was meeting these individuals in secluded places, out of the public eye, far away from any company business. The pieces of the puzzle I had been trying to ignore began to fit together in ways I wasn't prepared for. But the biggest shock came when John reported back with a revelation that shattered me to my core. Derek had been meeting with Jennifer. Jennifer, my daughter. The one I had always trusted more than anyone else, the one who had always been quiet and reserved, had been sneaking around with my son-in-law. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, and I felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under me. Derek wasn't just trying to take control of the company, he was trying to take everything from me. And Jennifer, my own daughter, was helping him. I couldn't comprehend it at first. How had I missed this? How had I not seen the signs? Jennifer had always been the quiet one, the one who stayed in the background, never seeking the limelight. But now, it was clear that I had been wrong about her. She had been playing a game behind my back, and Derek had been her partner in it all along. I thought about the way Jennifer had always looked at me, always deferential, always eager to please. Was it all just a facade? Had she been harboring resentment all these years, quietly plotting her own rise to power? Or had Derek manipulated her, just as he had with me, pulling her into his web of deceit? I felt sick to my stomach. Jennifer had betrayed me in a way I couldn't even fathom, and yet I had never suspected her. I had trusted her. How could she do this to me? The pieces clicked into place with a chilling finality. Derek wasn't working alone. He had been using Jennifer as a pawn in his game, and she had been playing her part flawlessly. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with, powerful, manipulative, and completely willing to destroy everything I had worked for. The company, the family, everything. I spent the next few days in a fog, trying to process everything. I had no idea what to do. Confronting Jennifer directly felt impossible. How could I even look at her the same way after everything I had discovered? And Derek, my son-in-law, the one who I had welcomed into my family all those years ago, was now my enemy. I didn't know who I could trust anymore. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I wasn't going to let them win. I had spent too many years building this empire, too many years sacrificing for my family, only to have it torn apart by the very people I had loved and trusted the most. I wasn't going to go down without a fight. I called John again. "I need more," I said. "I need everything you can find on Jennifer. I need to know her every move, where she's been, who she's been meeting. I need to know how deep this goes." "Got it," John replied, his voice steady. "I'll get to work right away." As the days passed, the tension in the house became unbearable. Claire, though recovering, still seemed distant, unaware of the storm that was brewing just beyond her understanding. Derek continued his charade, acting as if nothing had changed, his calm demeanor never faltering. But inside, I was consumed with rage and disbelief. I couldn't let this go. I couldn't let them take everything from me. The investigation had only just begun, but already the truth was becoming more horrifying than I had ever imagined. Derek and Jennifer were working together, manipulating everything for their own gain. And as the pieces of their conspiracy started to fall into place, I realized that the betrayal was deeper than I had feared. I wasn't just fighting for the company anymore. I was fighting for my family, for everything I had ever believed in, and I was determined not to let them win. I didn't know how or when, but I would find a way to turn the tables. The storm was only beginning, and I was ready to face it head on. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. The truth was already crawling beneath the surface, and it was only a matter of time before it came out. But confronting Jennifer, my own flesh and blood, felt like an impossible task. It was my daughter. How had I not seen the lies she'd been weaving right in front of me? How could someone I raised, someone I loved, betray me in such a profound way? But the pieces were falling into place. Derek, with his smooth words and hidden ambitions, had been playing me. But it wasn't just him. It was Jennifer, too. She had been involved in everything from the beginning, quietly manipulating, scheming behind my back, a puppet master working with Derek in the shadows. And the worst part was that, until now, I hadn't even suspected her. I knew what I had to do. I called Jennifer into my study, the very place where we had shared so many family moments over the years. The room felt colder now, as if the very walls had witnessed too many secrets to stay warm. My pulse quickened as she walked in, her face holding that familiar, trusting expression I had seen so many times before. But tonight, I wasn't going to let myself be fooled. I was going to confront her with everything. "Jennifer, sit down," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We need to talk." Her eyebrows furrowed slightly, her eyes widening with surprise. "What's going on, Mom? You seem upset." "Don't play innocent with me," I snapped. "I know what you've been doing, the meetings with Derek, the plans to take over the company, everything. I know about the affair, Jennifer, and I know you're not just manipulating him. You're trying to manipulate me. You've been trying to tear this family apart." For a moment, she just stared at me, her mouth slightly agape. Then she swallowed hard and tried to compose herself, her posture stiffening. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice trembling. "This is insane, Mom. You're overreacting. I leaned forward, my gaze unwavering. Don't lie to me. I know about the affair. I know you're working with Derek, and I know you've been plotting behind my back. So stop pretending, Jennifer. This ends tonight. There was silence. A long, heavy silence that seemed to stretch for eternity. Finally, Jennifer exhaled sharply and looked down at her hands. You don't understand, she murmured. The words, soft and weary, caught me off guard. I expected her to deny everything, to throw more lies at me, but instead, she seemed resigned. What don't I understand? I asked, my voice low, filled with disbelief. Jennifer lifted her eyes to meet mine, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something raw in them, pain, anger, and regret, but also a strange sense of clarity, as if everything she had done had been leading her to this very moment. I've always lived in the shadow of Claire, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Always the second choice, always overlooked. You always favored her. Mom, she was the perfect daughter, the perfect employee, the perfect everything. And she paused, her throat tightening. I was nothing, just the quiet one, the one you never really saw, always left behind. I felt a stab of guilt, but it was quickly replaced with confusion. Jennifer, I never favored Claire. I never intended to hurt you. I loved you both equally. But Jennifer shook her head, a bitter smile curling on her lips. Maybe you didn't mean to, but it's how it felt. Claire had everything. And what did I have? Nothing. No one ever noticed me. No one ever cared. So I decided to do something about it. I opened my mouth to speak, but she cut me off, her voice growing stronger, more determined. I wasn't going to sit back anymore, Mom. I wasn't going to live in the shadow of your precious Claire. So I met Derek, and I realized he could give me everything I wanted. He was ambitious, he had connections, he had power, and I realized that together, we could take control of everything. Your company, your life, everything you've built. I recoiled, her words like a slap across my face. You're using Derek to take over the company? I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and disbelief. Is that all this is about, Jennifer? Power? Ambition? She looked at me coldly, her expression hardening. It's not just about power, Mom. It's about finally being seen, finally being the one who matters. And now, I'm going to get what I deserve. I felt my stomach churn. I had spent so many years trying to protect my family, to build something solid, something lasting. And now my own daughter was part of the plot to tear it all down. But what shocked me even more was the lack of remorse in her voice. There was no regret, no apology, only cold determination. You're not just trying to take over the company, are you? I said quietly, the realization hitting me with full force. You're planning to get rid of me. You want to make sure Claire inherits everything, and then you'll eliminate her too, won't you? Jennifer didn't flinch. You don't understand, do you? Claire's weak. She's too nice, too naive. She won't be able to handle what's coming. But I will. And when I take control, everything will be mine. I sat there, stunned, my world crumbling around me. My own daughter, my flesh and blood, was planning to destroy me, to destroy everything I had worked for. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever felt. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady myself. The rage burned in my chest, but there was also something else, something I hadn't expected. I wasn't just angry at Jennifer. I was afraid of what she had become, afraid of the destruction she would bring if I didn't stop her. But there was one thing I knew for certain. I wasn't going to let her take everything from me. Not without a fight. I stood up slowly, my eyes locked on hers. You won't get away with this, Jennifer. I'll protect Claire, and I'll protect this company. You can't have it all. Jennifer stood as well, a mocking smile on her lips. You can try, Mom, but I'm already ahead of you. As she turned to leave, I felt the full weight of the moment. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, had betrayed me in the most profound way possible. But I wasn't done yet. I had a plan. I wasn't going to let Jennifer and Derek destroy everything I had worked for. I would stop them, no matter what it took. The conversation with Jennifer lingered in my mind, gnawing at me with every passing hour. Her words, cold, calculating, had torn through the layers of my trust, revealing the depths of her ambition. But now, I had no choice but to act. I couldn't just sit back and let her destroy everything I'd built. I had to understand how deep this went, how far she had gone to secure her place. I turned my attention to the company's finances. I had always kept a careful eye on the numbers, but now I needed to scrutinize every transaction, every report. Nothing could slip past me. Jennifer had already shown she was capable of manipulation, and I needed to ensure she hadn't been playing me at a much larger scale. Days blurred into nights as I pored over documents, comparing financial statements, invoices, and transfer records. I felt my pulse quicken as I uncovered the first signs of something far darker than I had imagined. There, buried deep within the company's accounts, were multiple transfers, large sums of money that had been moved into accounts I didn't recognize. Accounts that weren't linked to the company. It didn't take long to trace them back to Jennifer. She had been siphoning money for months, diverting funds into secret accounts without anyone, especially Claire, knowing. The scale of it was staggering, and it became clear. Jennifer had been planning this for far longer than I had realized. Her ambitions weren't just about the company's future. They were about securing her own wealth, her own power, and her own control. I felt sick as I continued digging. Jennifer had acted with such precision, such care, hiding her tracks, manipulating every financial document, every decision, to ensure that her piece of the company grew. The numbers were all there, in black and white, but the betrayal still felt like a punch to my gut. The further I dug, the more I saw just how far Jennifer was willing to go. It wasn't just about resentment anymore, or about feeling overlooked. It wasn't vanity or pride driving her. It was an unrelenting desire for power. She was no longer my daughter. She was a force to be reckoned with, and she would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. But what chilled me the most was realizing just how much she had already gained. I had been so focused on Derek, so consumed with his influence over Claire, that I had missed what was right in front of me. Jennifer had been using Derek, yes, but she was the mastermind. She had been pulling the strings all along. I couldn't waste any more time. Every moment I spent chasing shadows, trying to piece together the truth. Jennifer and Derek were moving closer to their goal. The company was at risk, and so was Claire. I knew I had to act, fast, but the weight of the situation bore down on me. Every move I made, every step I took, had to be calculated. Jennifer and Derek had been operating in the shadows, pulling strings, working with precision. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. The stakes were higher than I had ever imagined. It wasn't just about stopping them anymore. It was about protecting the family I had left. And the deeper I looked into Jennifer's secret dealings, the more I realized that the battle I was fighting wasn't just for the company. It was for my family's future. I had to be smart. I had to outmaneuver them at their own game. The truth was finally beginning to take shape. Every detail, every hidden move Jennifer had made was now clear to me. What I had initially believed to be mere ambition had grown into something far more sinister. She wasn't just aiming for a bigger slice of the company. She wanted it all. She had devised a plan to eliminate not just me, but Claire as well. I sat in the quiet of my study, the documents spread out before me. I reviewed the evidence once more, the weight of it pressing on my chest. Jennifer hadn't just been after the company. She had been playing a long game, and I had been blind to it. Derek, I realized, was nothing more than a pawn in her game. He had been used, manipulated into thinking he was part of the grand scheme. He was a tool, nothing more. But Jennifer, she was the mastermind behind everything. She had carefully orchestrated her moves, positioning herself to take control while eliminating any threats along the way. First me, then Claire. I couldn't breathe as I pieced it all together. The transfers of money, the quiet meetings with Derek, the meetings with people who had nothing to do with the company, the affairs, the lies. It was all part of her plan. She had been using every angle to secure her place at the top, all while pretending to be the loving daughter, the quiet one who could never harm a soul. But now I saw it for what it truly was. Jennifer wasn't just angry or resentful. She wasn't simply trying to carve out a space for herself in the world. She was desperate for power, and she was willing to destroy anyone who stood in her way. The company was just a means to an end. I was the obstacle, and Claire was next. I sat back in my chair, my head swimming with the implications of what I had just uncovered. How had it come to this? How had my own flesh and blood, the daughter I had loved and nurtured, become this ruthless, cold person? I thought about all the moments we shared, all the times I had tried to be there for her, to guide her, and I couldn't reconcile the girl I had raised with the woman she had become. Anger surged within me. but it was quickly overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of desolation. I had trusted Jennifer. I had believed in her. How could she have betrayed me like this? I ran a hand through my hair, trying to steady myself. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about Claire. The company had always been my legacy, but Claire, she was my heart. I had fought my entire life to protect her, to give her everything I never had. And now, it was all at risk. Jennifer wasn't just after my company. She was after Claire, too. I stood up abruptly, pacing the room. The storm was growing, and I had no choice but to face it head on. I couldn't let Jennifer succeed. I couldn't let her tear everything I had built apart, especially not for her own greed. But the thought of confronting her, of confronting my own daughter, made my stomach twist. I had trusted her. I had believed she would be the one to carry on my legacy, the one to take over the company when I stepped down. But now, it was clear. She didn't want to carry it forward. She wanted to own it, and everyone else be damned. I knew what I had to do. I had to stop her, but I couldn't do it alone. I needed to confront Jennifer and Derek, expose their lies, and make sure Claire was protected. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. Jennifer had already shown she was willing to do whatever it took to get what she wanted. She was relentless, and I couldn't underestimate her, mate. With all the pieces in place, I began to make my plan. The first step was clear. I needed to confront Jennifer. I needed to show her that I knew what she was doing, to let her know that I was no longer the naive mother she could manipulate. But as the reality of what I was about to do set in, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. My anger was strong, yes, but it was tempered with something I couldn't quite define, an aching sorrow, a deep, unshakable sadness. This wasn't just a battle for the company anymore. It was a fight for my family, and as much as I hated to admit it, I didn't know if I could win. I had never imagined that my own children would become the very ones I had to fight against. But now, as I looked at the path ahead, I knew there was no other choice. I had to protect Claire. I had to protect everything I had worked for. And if it meant fighting against my own daughter, then so be it. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. This was it. The battle was coming, and it would be more difficult than anything I had ever faced. But I would face it, no matter the cost. The time had come to stop Jennifer, and I wasn't going to let her win. As I continued to unravel the web of lies Jennifer had spun around me, another realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The game had grown more complex, and my youngest son, Ethan, was now a player in it, a pawn in Jennifer's scheme. I had always believed Ethan to be the most loyal of my children, the one who kept to himself, stayed out of the corporate battles, and focused on his own life. But now, watching him closely, I saw how easily he had been drawn into Jennifer's machinations. It began subtly. Ethan, who had always kept a distance from the family business, started showing up more often at gatherings, offering opinions on matters he had never cared about before. At first, I thought it was just a phase. Perhaps he was finally starting to take an interest. But as time went on, it became clear that Jennifer had something to do with it. She had been feeding him promises, manipulating him with words that appealed to his desire for recognition, for power. She had convinced him that if he helped her take control of the company, he would be rewarded. His own stake, a portion of the inheritance, a seat at the table where he could finally be important. The thought of Ethan, my son, being pulled into Jennifer's web of deceit was more than I could bear. He had always been the one who seemed to have the least ambition, the least desire for power. How could he fall for this? How could he allow Jennifer to twist his loyalty, turn him against me, against everything I had built? As I watched Ethan from a distance, I could see the gradual shift in him. The boy who had once looked to me for guidance now seemed distant, detached, like a stranger who no longer trusted me. Jennifer's promises of power and wealth were clouding his judgment, and the more I saw of it, the more I realized just how deeply he had become entangled in her plans. I felt betrayed, not just by Jennifer, but by Ethan too. How could he be so blind to the destruction his actions would cause? Didn't he realize what was at stake? Didn't he understand that Jennifer's plan wasn't about saving the family business? It was about her own selfish greed, her desire to rule, to control everything? The anger bubbled up inside me, but I fought to keep it in check. The last thing I wanted was to push Ethan further away. But I knew I couldn't let him continue down this path. I couldn't let Jennifer use him as another tool to get what she wanted. I began to plan carefully. The delicate balance between confronting him and protecting him from Jennifer's influence was more precarious than ever. I couldn't afford to alienate him completely, but I also couldn't allow him to be her pawn any longer. I had to find a way to neutralize him without destroying the last shred of trust between us. The idea came slowly, but it was the only option that made sense. I couldn't confront Ethan directly. Not yet, anyway. Jennifer had already put enough distance between him and me. Any forceful confrontation would push him into her corner even more. So I decided to take a different approach. I would use the one thing Jennifer had underestimated: Ethan's deep-rooted loyalty to the family, to me. I began feeding Ethan small bits of information, disguised as casual conversations, snippets of concerns about the company and the future. Slowly, I let him see the cracks in Jennifer's plan. I didn't force anything on him. I simply gave him a chance to see it for himself, to question his involvement, to understand that Jennifer wasn't who she appeared to be. But even as I started planting the seeds of doubt, I knew I had to be careful. Jennifer had already proved she was willing to go to any lengths to manipulate her way to the top, and I couldn't underestimate her influence over Ethan. He was vulnerable, caught between the desire for power and his deep-seated desire to belong, to be seen as important in the family he had always felt distant from. The tension between us grew. Ethan became more distant with every passing day, but I knew it wasn't just because of the company. It was because he felt torn. Jennifer's words were still fresh in his mind, but the quiet pull of family loyalty was beginning to tug at his conscience. I spent sleepless nights, questioning myself. Had I failed him? Had I raised him to be weak, easily swayed? The guilt gnawed at me, but the reality was clear. I had to stop Jennifer, even if it meant facing my own son. The stakes were too high. If I didn't act, Jennifer and Ethan might succeed in taking everything from me: the company, my legacy, my family. But it wasn't just about business. It was about trust, about the fractured bond between mother and child. I had never imagined that I would be in a position where I had to fight against my own children, but the betrayal cut so deep that I couldn't ignore it any longer. Jennifer's manipulation of Ethan was the last piece of the puzzle I needed to see clearly. I had no choice now. I would have to confront both of them. I would have to expose Jennifer's plan before it was too late, and I would have to pull Ethan back from the edge. But as I prepared for the inevitable confrontation, a deep sense of dread filled me. I knew that whatever happened next, it would change everything. The path I was walking on was a dangerous one, and I wasn't sure I could protect the family I had worked so hard to build without losing everything in the process. I had waited for this moment far longer than I ever thought I would. The truth, the whole ugly truth, was finally ready to be exposed, and I couldn't hold back anymore. I had the evidence, the financial records, the hidden accounts, the secrets Jennifer had worked so hard to bury. It was time to confront her, to expose everything she had done, to take control of the mess she had created. I arranged to meet her in a private place, away from prying eyes, knowing that if I let her off the hook now, I would regret it for the rest of my life. The weight of betrayal was heavy in my chest, but there was no turning back. When I saw her standing there, her face as calm and composed as ever, a flicker of doubt almost made me hesitate. But I couldn't. I had spent too much time piecing everything together to let her manipulate me once again. She was my daughter, yes, but she had crossed a line I could never forgive. "Jennifer," I said, my voice steady, despite the storm raging inside me. "We need to talk. It's time you face what you've done." Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Instead, she folded her arms, a calm smile tugging at the corners of her lips, as if she already knew what was coming. She had always been the master of control, but this time, it wasn't going to work. "I've seen everything, Jennifer," I continued, laying the papers on the table between us. "The money transfers, the secret accounts, the way you've been siphoning funds from the company. You thought I wouldn't notice, but I did, and I know about you and Derek." At the mention of Derek's name, her composure faltered for a brief second, but she quickly regained her calm, her gaze cold and calculating. "I don't know what you think you know, but I haven't done anything wrong," she said, her voice icy. I leaned forward, my gaze never leaving hers. "Don't lie to me. I know about the affair, Jennifer. I know you've been using him, using everything around you to get what you want. You've been planning to take over the company. You've been planning to eliminate me and Claire, That's the truth, isn't it? She remained silent for a moment, her eyes flicking to the papers in front of her before she let out a soft laugh, one without humor. You think I'm the villain here? You think I'm the one who's wrong? Her voice rose slightly, sharp, filled with a venom I hadn't expected. Yes, I said firmly, because that's exactly what you've become. A villain in your own family. You've been plotting behind my back, manipulating everyone, including Derek. And now, you're willing to destroy everything I've built just to get your hands on it. For the first time in this entire conversation, Jennifer seemed to let her guard slip. She stood up straight, her eyes burning with a mixture of anger and something darker, resentment, maybe even hatred. You never understood me, did you, Mom? She asked, her voice cold but tinged with bitterness. You and Claire, you've always had everything. The love, the attention, the respect. I've spent my entire life in your shadows, never seen for who I really am. You never gave me the space I needed to be my own person, to be recognized. And all of this, everything I've done, it's because of you. It's because I needed to prove that I matter. The words cut through me, deeper than I expected. The raw emotion in her voice, her hurt, her anger, it felt like a slap to the face. But I had to stay strong. I had to see this through. You think I've never recognized you? I asked, my voice trembling slightly, though I fought to keep control. I've always loved you, Jennifer. But this isn't about love. This is about power. You're willing to destroy your own family just to feel important. I'm not going to let you do that. Jennifer's gaze hardened. You never understood me. You only saw what you wanted to see. You never gave me the chance to prove myself. You always put Claire first, always gave her the company, always treated her like she was the only one who mattered. The bitterness in her voice took me by surprise, but it was her next words that shocked me the most. And Derek, he wasn't just a tool, he was a way out. He was my chance to get everything I deserved. I used him, yes, but he used me too. I never wanted him, Mom. I never needed him. I just needed someone to help me get what I wanted. Her admission hung in the air, thick with tension. For a moment, Derek's role in all of this seemed less significant. Jennifer had never cared for him. He had been nothing more than a means to an end. And in that moment, I realized just how far she was willing to go to get what she wanted. There was no remorse, no guilt, just a cold, calculating desire for control. I heard a sound behind me. I turned to see Derek standing in the doorway, his face pale, his expression one of shock. I didn't know, he said softly, his voice shaky. I didn't know she was planning this. I thought we were in this together. But Jennifer merely shot him a glance, her eyes narrowing. You're too weak for this, Derek, she said dismissively. You were never part of the plan. You were just a tool. Derek stood there, stunned, his face crumpling as he realized the truth. For all the manipulation, for all the power games Jennifer had played, he had been as much of a pawn as anyone else. I never wanted to hurt anyone, Derek said quietly, almost to himself, before turning and walking away. It was too late, though. His attempt to distance himself was meaningless now. The damage had been done. I turned back to Jennifer, my resolve hardening. This ends now, Jennifer. You're out of the company. You're out of this family. Her eyes flared with anger, but there was nothing she could do. I had the evidence. I had the control. The time for manipulation was over. I'm not going anywhere, Jennifer spat, her voice venomous. I'm not asking, I replied coldly. You've lost, and now you'll face the consequences. With that, I turned and walked away from her, the final piece of the puzzle falling into place. The power had shifted back into my hands, but as I left the room, the weight of everything hit me. The family I had built, the trust I had given, had been shattered beyond repair. But in the end, I had won. The company was mine, and Claire's. Jennifer was out. But at what cost? I didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was certain. The battle wasn't over, and nothing, not even family, would ever be the same again. The battle was far from over, but the first step had been taken. With Jennifer and Derek ousted from the company, I finally felt a sense of control returning to my life. It wasn't the victory I had hoped for. It was much more complicated than that, but it was a victory nonetheless. Jennifer was gone. Derek, too. Their ambitions and manipulations no longer had a hold on my empire, but the cost had been high. I called an emergency meeting with the board of directors. It was time to act decisively, to seize what was rightfully mine. I had to reassure the shareholders that the company would remain strong, that their investments were safe, and that everything I had built would survive. I couldn't let the instability caused by Jennifer's scheming destroy all the years of hard work. The meeting was tense. I could feel the eyes of the board members on me as I entered the room, every one of them waiting for me to say something, to offer some semblance of assurance. They knew what had happened. They knew the family drama had spilled into the business, but they needed leadership. They needed confidence. "Thank you all for coming at such short notice," I began, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I won't waste your time. We've had a betrayal within the company. Jennifer Pierce and Derek have been removed from their positions. I now assume full control of the business. As of today, Claire will step into the leadership role, supported by me." I saw a few heads nod. Some looked relieved, others uncertain. But they all knew what needed to be done, and they knew I was the one to do it. "From this moment on, Jennifer and Derek will have no influence on the company," I continued. "I'm restructuring our operations. We're tightening our security, both financially and strategically. We will ensure that no one will be able to undermine us again." The room was silent, and for a moment, I allowed myself to feel the weight of the situation. This wasn't just about me taking control. It was about ensuring the survival of everything I had worked for, everything I had built for Claire. I knew that my actions, while necessary, would leave scars on Claire, on the company, on my family, but they were scars that needed to exist if I was going to protect us all. Claire, standing by my side, was more composed than I had ever seen her. The girl who had once been so sheltered, so cautious, had transformed. She was strong now. She had no choice but to be. Her eyes met mine, and I saw not just the daughter I had raised, but the leader she was becoming. "You're ready," I said quietly to her, just loud enough for her to hear. She nodded, her jaw set with resolve. "I'm ready." We were in this together. The company would not only survive, it would thrive. But there was more to do. I wasn't just safeguarding the business. I had to protect Claire's future. Jennifer had done everything in her power to destroy us, and I couldn't afford to let her efforts continue from the shadows. The reorganization of the company would ensure that no one, especially Jennifer or Derek, could ever gain access to what they thought they could control. As the meeting adjourned, I felt the first sense of relief in days. The path was laid out before me. Claire was in charge now, but I was still the one pulling the strings. I would guide her, protect her, and make sure the company would remain strong under her leadership. But despite the progress, there were still unanswered questions. Ethan. He had been the wild card in all of this. At first, I had hoped that his involvement in Jennifer's plot was just a phase. But now, watching his behavior from a distance, I realized he was pulling away from everything he had once believed in. Jennifer's influence over him was dissolving. He had started to see her for what she really was, the manipulative, power-hungry person she had always been. But it wasn't that simple. He still felt torn, confused by his loyalty to her and his own guilt over his role in her schemes. I watched him quietly, keeping my distance, unsure of what to say to him. The betrayal stung, but I knew I had to give him space. He needed time to process everything, to see that the life he had been drawn into was nothing like the one he had hoped for. I knew I couldn't protect Claire and the company without making hard choices. I had been ruthless, yes, but it was necessary. The family business, our legacy, was more important than my personal feelings or my past failures as a mother. I had to keep the reins tight, because if I loosened my grip, there would be nothing left to save. Despite the pressure, despite the doubts gnawing at me, I knew one thing. The survival of this empire was my responsibility, and as long as I drew breath, I would protect it, no matter the cost. The control was back in my hands, but it had come at a great price. I couldn't let myself falter, not now, not when everything was on the line. I had to be strong, for Claire, for Ethan, for the company, and for the family that had torn itself apart. But I also knew, deep down, that no matter what happened next, the trust within this family, the foundation that had held us all together for so long, was broken. And that, more than anything, was the hardest thing to accept. I had done it. Jennifer and Derek were finally out of the picture, removed from the company, stripped of their power, and cast aside like the traitors they had proven to be. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel the rush of victory, but the taste of triumph was bitter, sour even. It was a hollow victory, one that came at the expense of everything I had ever known, everything I had once believed. The company was starting to take shape again, under Claire's leadership. She was steady, confident, and despite everything, stronger than I ever could have hoped. She was ready. But as much as I admired her strength, the scars of the last few months lingered in the air between us. There were wounds that couldn't be healed with just a change in leadership. Jennifer and Derek had been more than just business partners. They had been family. But now, they were nothing. Their betrayal had cost them everything. Their jobs, their influence, their place at the table. And most devastating of all, they had lost their position in our family. I had to make the hardest decision of all, cutting them out completely. The moment I signed those documents, officially severing their ties to the company, I felt a weight lift. But it was also as though a part of me had been torn away. I hadn't just lost them as business partners. I had lost them as family. With that decision, I had also been forced to let go of Jennifer in a way I never imagined possible. The daughter I had raised, the child I had loved and trusted, had chosen power over everything else. And the cost was too high for me to ignore. It wasn't just business anymore. It was personal. And yet, despite the anger, despite the betrayal, I knew that severing ties was necessary, for the sake of Claire, for the company, and for my own peace of mind. As I prepared to move forward, to rebuild and restore what had been damaged, a deep sense of sorrow filled me. I wasn't just mourning the loss of Jennifer as a business partner, or even as my daughter. I was mourning the relationship we once had, a relationship that had been built on trust and love, now shattered beyond repair. But I couldn't afford to stay stuck in that pain. Claire was counting on me to be her strength, and the company was counting on me to guide it through this storm. I couldn't falter. The sacrifices I had made, the battles I had fought, were all leading to this moment. But the weight of it all felt crushing. And then there was Ethan, my son, the one I had hoped would be the bridge between the old and new, the one who would help restore the family. But even he had been pulled into Jennifer's twisted web. It was hard to watch him still teetering on the edge, caught between the manipulation of Jennifer and the reality of what was happening around him. For a while, it seemed like Ethan was drifting further and further away from the family. The guilt I felt about his involvement in this mess, about how I had failed him in some ways, gnawed at me. But there was a shift. I started to notice him pulling back from Jennifer's influence. The fog was beginning to lift for him, and slowly, he started to understand what I had done to protect us all. I could see him struggling, torn between his loyalty to Jennifer and his growing realization of the damage she had caused. I hadn't given up on him. Not yet, but I knew that I couldn't force him to see things my way. He had to come to that conclusion on his own. As I watched Ethan begin to distance himself from Jennifer, I felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't too late for him to return to the family, to find his place again. But that hope was tempered with the knowledge that things would never be the same. Jennifer's manipulation had left scars on all of us, scars that would take time to heal, if they ever could. I devoted myself fully to rebuilding the company, focusing on Claire's leadership, ensuring she was equipped to take the reins fully, without looking back. But every step I took, every decision I made, felt weighed down by the aftermath of betrayal. Jennifer and Derek were gone, but their actions still haunted me. Their treachery had shaken me to my core, and no matter how much I tried to move forward, I couldn't escape the lingering pain of it. There were still challenges ahead, restructuring the company, ensuring that the family's legacy remained intact, all while dealing with the fallout from the betrayals. But the hardest part of all was the emotional toll. The hurt, the broken trust, it was all still fresh. I knew it would take time to rebuild not just the company, but the relationships within the family. The family I had fought so hard to protect now felt like a distant memory. I had fought so fiercely for Claire, for the company, that I hadn't realized how much it had cost me. Jennifer's betrayal had shattered the very core of what I believed family should be, and the hardest part was knowing that even as I took control, even as I began to rebuild, that the damage had been done. The trust was gone, and though I had come out victorious, the cost was far higher than I had anticipated. I would protect Claire, I would protect the company, but I couldn't change the past, and that truth was something I would carry with me forever. The fall of Jennifer and Derek marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, but it was one I would have to navigate carefully, one step at a time. And so, as I stood by Claire's side, guiding her, shaping the future of the company, I knew that my work was far from over. But the one thing that was certain was that the fight had cost me more than I could have ever imagined, and that no matter what came next, the scars of betrayal would stay with me, lingering just beneath the surface. The transition had been smoother than I anticipated. Claire had stepped into the role of CEO with a quiet yet unshakable confidence, as though she had been preparing for this her entire life. I watched her lead, making decisions with a clarity and poise that I could never have expected from her when she was younger. She wasn't the same girl I had once sheltered. She was becoming the leader I had always hoped she would be. As for me, I knew my time had come. My involvement with the company had been my identity for so long, but now, with Claire at the helm, it was time for me to step back. I couldn't remain in the shadow of my own creation. I had to let go. But stepping away didn't mean disappearing. My role as matriarch, as the guiding force behind everything we had built, would never truly leave me. I would remain as a trusted advisor, a figurehead, but I would no longer have the daily responsibilities, the constant weight of decision-making. At first, I felt a sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Claire was capable, more than capable. She had the mind for strategy, the vision to propel the company forward, and most importantly, she had the fire in her that I had always hoped would define her leadership. But as the days passed, a growing sense of melancholy began to creep in. I found myself watching her from the sidelines, seeing her take on the burdens that I had once carried with such determination. And though I was proud, a small part of me ached. It was the same ache I had felt when I realized I had to cut Jennifer out of the family. That sense of losing something precious. Now, I was watching my daughter step into the role that had been mine for decades, and with it, I felt the passing of an era. I had always known that one day this moment would come, but knowing it was inevitable didn't make it any easier. I had poured my heart and soul into building this empire, and now it was time for Claire to take it to places I could never have imagined. And yet, as much as I knew this was her time, as much as I wanted to see her succeed, the transition left me with a lingering sadness, a sense that something had been lost. My place in the company, my role in the family, had changed. I was still the mother, still the matriarch, but I wasn't the one making the decisions anymore. I wasn't the one driving the future. I couldn't help but think of Jennifer. Even as I felt proud of Claire, I couldn't escape the shadow of what had happened. The betrayal, the manipulations, those scars would never fully heal. The relationship I had once had with Jennifer was gone, irreparably broken. And though Claire and I had come through the storm stronger, the trust I had once had in both of my children had been forever altered. Ethan, in particular, weighed heavily on my mind. He had been through so much, caught between loyalty to Jennifer and the painful reality of what had happened. I could see him trying to rebuild his life, trying to find his place again. But there was no denying that he, too, had been affected by the turmoil. His position within the family would never be the same. He had once been the son I could count on, the one who stayed out of the conflict, but now the distance between us was palpable. He was lost in his own way, unsure of where he fit in the new reality I had created. I knew that it wasn't just the company that needed rebuilding. It was our family. Claire was becoming the leader I had hoped for, but Ethan was still adrift. I could see the pain in his eyes, the guilt he carried for his part in the manipulation. But I also saw the regret, the dawning realization that Jennifer's promises had been empty. The boy who once trusted in the family had been led astray by the wrong person, and now he had to navigate his way back to us. There were moments, quiet moments late at night, when I would find myself thinking about the price of all that had happened. Yes, I had fought for the company, for the legacy. I had protected Claire, even when the cost was high. But the cost had been higher than I had ever anticipated. I had lost Jennifer, lost Ethan's trust, lost the family dynamic that had been so solid for so many years. And as I sat in my office, watching Claire work, making decisions I once made, I couldn't help but feel the weight of it all. Yes, the company was safe. Yes, Claire was leading with strength. But the price I paid for this safety, this victory, was steep. The family I had fought so hard to protect was no longer the same. The trust that had once been a cornerstone of our bond had been shattered. I had won, yes, but I had lost too. And so, I prepared myself for this new chapter in my life. I would continue to guide Claire, continue to be there for Ethan when he was ready. But I couldn't escape the knowledge that the dynamics had changed forever. The scars of betrayal would never fade entirely, and the relationships I once thought were unbreakable had been tested in ways I could never have predicted. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the family I had known and loved would never be the same again. And as much as I tried to embrace this new reality, a part of me would always mourn the loss of what we had once been. This was the new chapter, and I wasn't sure yet if it would be one of redemption or of quiet mourning. But I knew it was mine to write, just as Claire was now writing hers. The final chapter of this long, hard journey had come. As I sat in the quiet of my office, the weight of the past few years hung heavily on me. Everything I had fought for, the company, the family, was still standing, but the cost had been steep. The foundation I had built with so much effort had been tested in ways I couldn't have imagined, and the scars were still fresh. The betrayals, the lies, the shattered trust, it all lingered like a shadow. One I would never escape. But in the stillness, there was also a sense of accomplishment. I had protected the empire I had spent decades building. I had fought off the threats, I had faced down my own children, and I had come out victorious. I had ensured that Claire, my daughter, would carry the legacy forward. Claire was ready. I saw it now, more than ever. She had grown, not just in her ability to lead, but in her understanding of the burden that came with the role. She was taking charge of the company, and it was clear to me that she had the strength to navigate the treacherous waters I had spent so many years in. She was prepared to face the challenges ahead, even if those challenges would mirror the ones I had encountered. The fight against greed, ambition, and the thirst for power would never end. I had shown her that, and I knew she would be ready to stand firm. Still, as I watched her take on more responsibility, a sense of loss settled in my heart. Yes, Claire was stepping into the role I had held for so long, but there was an unspoken grief in watching her take the reins. I had spent my entire life carving out a space for myself, and for the first time, I was stepping away. In her hands, the company was safe. My legacy was in good hands, but the personal cost, the relationships that had been fractured, would never be the same. I had seen Claire's growth, seen her strength, but I also knew the weight that now rested on her shoulders. It was more than just managing the company. It was holding together a family that had been torn apart by betrayal and manipulation. I had done everything I could to protect her, but the truth was clear. She would have to fight her own battles now. Just as I had faced my own demons, she would have to confront the same ones: greed, ambition, and the very forces that had nearly destroyed us all. And that thought brought me a strange comfort. I had been a warrior in my own right, fighting for everything that mattered to me. And now Claire would take up that mantle. I had done my part. I had protected her. And now it was her turn to protect the legacy we had built. As I prepared to step away completely, to leave the day-to-day decisions to Claire, I reflected on everything that had led me to this point. There was no denying the sacrifices I had made, the moments lost with my children, the relationships damaged beyond repair. But there was also no denying the strength I had found in myself, in Claire, and in the company I had built. I had fought for the future, even when it seemed like the past was slipping through my fingers. And now, as I watched Claire take charge, I knew I had done what needed to be done. I had given her the tools to succeed, and I had ensured that the company would thrive under her leadership. But as I looked back on the years of struggle, the betrayals, and the lies, there was still a deep ache in my heart. The damage had been done. Jennifer was lost to me, and while Ethan was slowly finding his way back, things would never be the same. The family I had once known, the family I had fought to protect, had been irrevocably changed. And yet, despite the pain, I knew this was my legacy. Not just the empire I had built, but the lessons I had imparted, the strength I had passed on to Claire, the sacrifices, the betrayals, the heartache. They had all led to this moment. And in that, there was peace. Claire had proven herself, and I knew she would continue the mission I had started. The company would thrive, but the cost of keeping it intact would always linger in the background. The scars from Jennifer and Derek's betrayal would never fully heal, and the relationship with my children would never be what it once was. But the legacy, the strength of what we had built together, would carry on. As I walked out of the office for the last time, I looked back at the place I had spent so many years building, shaping, fighting for. And though it was time for me to step away, I knew that the fire that had burned inside me all these years had been passed on. Claire would carry it now. She would carry it for both of us. And as I moved forward into this new chapter, I knew I could never erase the past, but I also knew that the future was in good hands. And with that, I found the peace I had been searching for. My legacy was secure, and that was enough. The end of my story had come. But Claire's was just beginning. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.